Today I'm speaking with Dr. Doug Fridsma. Doug is a physician, an internal medicine physician, and also has a PhD in biomedical informatics from Stanford. Starting in 2009, he joined the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, was there for some 5 years, and is now the president of the American Medical Informatics Association. So Doug, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So you were there from the beginning of high tech, effectively through the end, although ONC is still in operation. From my point of view, you guys accomplished a great deal, more maybe than I would have imagined, than many people would have imagined. So can you tell us what you feel the high points and the major accomplishments were?
Well, I think, if you take a look at the adoption of electronic health records in the country, when we started in 2009, there was about a 17% adoption of electronic health records. Just last year, it's, at least in the larger medical centers, it's close to 80, 90%. And even among the physicians in the smaller practices, it's probably in the range of 60 to 70%. So in the course of 5 years, we took 20% of the largest GDP in the world, and we converted essentially from a paper-based system to an electronic system. And I think it's not the end. That actually is now the beginning, as we begin to figure out how to connect the pieces and how we can refine and make them better for the doctors and the patients that use them.
So as I speak about things today, I say that the first big challenge was adoption, and that has been largely overcome, not entirely overcome. And predictably, the next big challenge is interoperability. And as you read about physician frustrations with EMRs, the difficulty of getting these systems to talk to each other is usually high on their list, if not at the top of their list. So where do you feel we are on that, and what does your crystal ball tell us?
Well, I think interoperability is probably the next big challenge. I think there are issues in usability. I think there are issues with safety and security. All of those things I think are going to be important now that we've got adoption. But when it comes to interoperability, the thing that is so critical is to really define what it is that you want to do. So when somebody complains that their systems are not interoperable, my first question to them is, well, what were you trying to accomplish? The definition of interoperability is about the ability to exchange information and then the ability to use the information that's been exchanged. So you can't separate interoperability from the thing you want to do. So, we think sometimes that interoperability is this green pasture that we're eventually going to get to, this sort of state of being that everything is going to work. But in fact, interoperability is one of those things that's based on the things you want to do. It's incremental. It's iterative, and we will never probably ever get there entirely because there will always be a new thing that we want to do for which the capability doesn't exist.
So in this course and in the informatics world in general, there's a lot of excitement about FHIR as maybe the solution to interoperability. What are your views on that, and do you see FHIR as the sort of tool that can evolve as people's requirements become more sophisticated over time?
So the great thing about FHIR is it solves a problem. And when you've got a standard or if you've got a technology that solves a problem, people are going to use it because it helps them. A lot of times we create standards in committees and we have the expectation that if we build it, people will then use it. And we've got that wrong. What we need to do is we need to find the problems for which we can develop standards that solve those solutions. HL7, which is sort of the place that FHIR has developed, it had their first set of standards really to help create interoperability within the enterprise. And many of the vendors adopted it. It was wildly successful. It was able to connect all of the pharmacy systems to the laboratory systems and things using those kinds of messages. FHIR stands to transform the same thing between enterprises. And because it's aimed at the implementer, and geared towards the person who's actually going to have to use it. It's simple, it's easy to use, it uses the best technologies that are out there. And a standard isn't a standard because you say it is, it's a standard because people use it. And this is a standard that people actually are using, and so I think it's going to have tremendous impact.
So shifting gears a bit, we've emphasized in this course, and are emphasizing the chronic disease patient who's got multiple problems and multiple doctors. There's an obvious need for information sharing there, and the role that the patient might and arguably should play in their own care. As you look out to the future, how do you see the patient fitting into the whole spectrum of informatics and where the data is stored and how the data is accessed?
Well, you can take a look at what's happened in other parts of a person's life, an individual's life, to get a sense for what may be happening in healthcare. So it used to be that to get an airline ticket, you had to call up a travel agent who would then access this system that you had no way of knowing what was in there. Now, all of those things are available for individuals, and they can make their own hotel reservations and their own plane tickets. I think EHRs right now are kind of in that same role. You go there, there's information in there that the doctor tells you about, and then you use that information in your healthcare. As we begin to open that up, not only in terms of having access for patients, but for patients to put their own information into it, you suddenly have more information, and you empower the patient to have a whole lot more knowledge about what's going on. So to me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because the things that are happening in the rest of society are going to begin to impact healthcare in a substantive way. And as it becomes easier and cheaper for patients to have access to their own information, that's going to happen.
So if adoption was the first big challenge and interoperability is the second, at least in my view of the world, the third is analytics. Where do you think we are in analytics, and where do you think we're going to go in the next few years?
I think, again, there's a lot of good work that's been done in bioinformatics. I think we're starting to see it in other areas in which people are beginning to aggregate that data. Part of the challenge that we have in healthcare is that not only do we have knowledge about healthcare and medicine and the associations there, we need to be able to apply that to the data that we see. And so it isn't simple mathematical relationships. It isn't necessarily simple associations, but there's sort of a deep understanding of medicine and care delivery that's embedded in the data there. So it's an exciting time, because as more and more of this data becomes available, we're going to be able to apply those informatics techniques to be able to extract information, but to do it in a way that is understanding of how the care is delivered. And if we can leverage the best that's happening in the engineering field and computer science and marry that with what we understand about healthcare delivery, I think we're going to make some good progress. Are we there yet? No. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done. We're seeing some areas of excellence, sort of centers that are doing some of that. There are some hospitals like Geisinger and Kaiser and others that are doing some analytic work. But I only see this accelerating at an incredibly rapid pace. Storage and the movement of the data is becoming less and less expensive, and as a result, I think more and more analytics will be applied.
Is the lack of structure in a great deal of medical record information a barrier to that? Do we need to keep pushing toward a goal that many of us had years and years ago of everything being structured, or are we okay with where we're at in terms of the nature of the data?
I actually think that you need structure when you need to make decisions or help for an individual patient or a small group of patients. It's difficult to determine a drug-drug interaction through data analytics on a single patient. So you need to be able to categorize that stuff so that rules can fire and alerts can be sent. But when you start to have hundreds of millions of patients, I think the need for structure actually goes down. And even technologies like IBM Watson unstructures structured data to be able to do the analytics that they do. So I think we need to be very comfortable with the ability to have unstructured data. Part of the challenge that we're going to have is that if what we do is we require structure as a barrier to exchange of information, we're going to sell ourselves short in our ability to do analytics. We need to get all the data out there so that we can apply those analytics.
If you could rewind the clock and spend your 5 years at ONC all over again, what are one or two things you would do differently?
You know, it was a remarkable time to be in the federal government with passage of the HITECH Act and just the excitement that was going on. You know, obviously, if all of the standards had been baked and had been ready, that we could have just picked them off the shelf and put them out there, you know, that would have made our job a lot easier. You know, what we need is going to be a portfolio. We have the beginnings of a portfolio. I think we did a grand experiment that was different than any other country in terms of how we tried to approach this problem. We didn't engineer it from the top down. We created the building blocks and allowed the market to sort of drive that. Now, it's resulted in some innovative companies sort of getting lost. I wish there was a way that we could have created a playing field that allowed everybody to sort of equally compete. But sometimes that's hard. And when you use a market-driven approach, there are some winners and losers in all of that. The challenge that we have, I think, is that as we have all of these products out there and we've reached a level of saturation and adoption in the marketplace, we're going to start to see some consolidation. What's important is that we don't lose that innovative and entrepreneurial edge as that happens. And I think things like Fire that produce the ability to create apps and to create other kinds of functionality are going to be really important as we go into that next level where we take what we have now and we begin to refine it and add the analytics that we need.
The Jason report essentially paints a picture of EHRs as a database. And most of the end user work, particularly physicians and patients, is done through apps that access data from that database using Fire and also, of course, can add data to it. Is that the world of the future that you see?
I think increasingly the electronic health record is going to be a data store in the sky. I think that patients are going to be the principal health information exchange in that they'll be the hub for all this information that's going to be exchanged. I hope that at the end, all of this technology doesn't create additional barriers for patients, but makes them first-order participants in their care. I think when that happens, we are actually going to be able to have tremendous innovation. Perhaps the biggest underutilized innovative force in medicine is the patient. And I think their needs are going to probably drive more innovation than anything that we could think about with regard to physicians and nurses and others who are using the electronic health record.
So the exercise the students in this course are going through in teams to learn Fire and develop Fire apps toward the future world where that's the primary vehicle for use by physicians and patients makes sense to you, it sounds like.
Yeah, it does. I think that's a great approach to kind of set the stage. I mean, if you want to know what the future is, you have to be there and try to invent it.
Well, great. Thank you so much
Thank you
for being with me here today.
Thank you.